one former NBA referee has took the gloves off in this gambling scandal. He's exposing everybody.
A shocking whistleblower has just shattered the silence around the WNBA, and all eyes are now locked on Commissioner Cathy Engelbart. A former referee has come forward with explosive allegations claiming that game outcomes were secretly influenced not by the players, but by forces inside the league itself.
The whistleblowers is coming out of the woodwork. Now, we know Adam Silver was pressed hard this past weekend whenever he was out at games, making an appearance, and they wasted no time at all getting him pretty much putting the camera in his face, putting the mic in his face.
From suspicious foul calls to questionable officiating patterns, this isn't just another rumor. It's a direct hit at the league's credibility. Fans who once believed in fair play are now demanding answers. And what this referee revealed could shake the entire WNBA to its very core.
You know, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. I think when you talk about arrests being made by the FBI, I think the guys that are arrested are going to sit down and, be scared to death with what they're facing, and they're going to start to cooperate, and they're going to tell the FBI everything they know, and this thing is going to spread like wildfire, and you're going to find out that this is a lot bigger than it is right now, and it's pretty big.
It all started with a single post that sent shockwaves through the basketball world. A veteran WNBA referee, known for years of officiating some of the league's biggest games, finally broke his silence. In an interview that has since gone viral, he detailed how certain league officials allegedly influenced game results behind the scenes. According to him, referees were sometimes given unofficial instructions on which players to watch more closely, which fouls to prioritize, and even how to subtly shift the momentum of a match.
People with power and money feel that the rules don't apply to them, and they're not going to get caught. And you get a little bit cocky like I did and think that you're going to get away with something like this, and you just don't. You eventually always get caught.
What seemed like coincidence on the court now looks more like coordination. The whistleblower claimed that these directives didn't always come from game supervisors, but occasionally from higher up, a phrase he used carefully, without saying Cathy Engelbart's name directly. But his tone said enough. He spoke about internal pressures to protect the league's image, even if that meant favoring certain teams or stars for television ratings and sponsorship obligations. Games that were supposed to be fair competition, he said, became carefully managed entertainment.
You know, it's just a situation where, you're hanging out with the wrong people different times, and people are connected to the mob, and you get comfortable with somebody, you think they're your friend, and the next thing you know, they have something on you, or you're in an enormous amount of debt to them for some reason, and they have their claws into you, and they're going to put pressure on you to do things for them in regard to information, so that they can continue to make millions and millions of dollars.
Fans who've long questioned questionable officiating during high-stakes matchups suddenly felt vindicated. Every controversial call against a breakout rookie or a rising franchise started to look deliberate. The whistleblower even mentioned multiple occasions where referees were allegedly reprimanded for not following subtle league cues. It wasn't about outright fixing the score, it was about shaping narratives, deciding who the hero would be and who would take the fall.
When you talk about wire fraud, that's a law that can be applied to many different things. And if you're just calling your buddy and telling them that somebody's not playing, even if it's a nonchalant comment, you're transferring that over state lines, that's wire fraud, and that's what I was charged with. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind some of these star players might have been saying something to their buddies back home that they weren't playing, or one of the other guys weren't playing, or they weren't 100%, and bets were placed and money was made.
What makes this revelation even more explosive is the timing. With public scrutiny already at an all-time high over officiating inconsistencies and fan outcry over Caitlin Clark's treatment, these accusations land like dynamite. The league can't afford another scandal, yet the evidence is starting to pile up. And according to the whistleblower, this is only the beginning, because the people behind the curtain weren't just protecting stars. They were allegedly protecting power itself.
In my situation, I remember I thought I was just going to give the guy the picks for 3 months and be done with it. And the FBI agent said they would have never, released you. You were their golden goose. And if you would have stopped giving them the picks that they wanted, they would end up killing you. So, the mob is the mob, and it's still prevalent in the United States of America. I know people think that it's not, but it's still working very, very hard.
Once the whistleblower's statement hit the airwaves, fans began combing through past games, and what they uncovered was alarming. Footage after footage revealed moments that now seemed far from coincidence. Star players mysteriously getting into early foul trouble, game-winning drives halted by questionable calls, and underdog teams suddenly losing momentum right after taking the lead. The numbers didn't lie. Over the last 2 seasons, statistics showed that certain franchises benefited from a disproportionate number of calls in clutch moments. Especially during nationally televised games, online analysts started connecting dots, building timelines and sharing clips that painted a disturbing picture. The supposed mistakes by referees weren't random. They followed patterns. Teams tied to major sponsorships or cities with higher TV ratings appeared to receive favorable treatment. In contrast, smaller market teams, or those lacking star power, seemed to face tougher officiating. One particular analyst even pointed out how game footage showed refs consistently calling contact on one side of the court while ignoring identical plays on the other. It wasn't just inconsistency, it was orchestration. And then came the smoking gun. Leaked internal emails circulating online. Although unverified, they hinted at pressure from upper management to ensure marquee matchups remain competitive and avoid blowouts that harm engagement. Those lines, if proven authentic, suggest that the league wasn't just overseeing games, it was shaping them for entertainment value. Fans immediately began demanding transparency, while sports journalists called it the biggest integrity crisis in women's basketball history. Meanwhile, Cathy Engelbart remained silent. The league office released a short, carefully worded statement denying any intentional manipulation of gameplay. But, for many, that denial only fueled more suspicion, because if the whistleblower's story holds true, the WNBA's reputation for fairness could collapse entirely, and the deeper reporters dig into these strange patterns. The more the evidence seems to point towards something systematic, not accidental. The question now isn't whether manipulation happened, it's who gave the order and why. As the scandal gained traction, one name kept surfacing: Cathy Engelbart, the WNBA commissioner at the center of growing outrage. Though she hadn't been directly accused by the whistleblower, her leadership style and decision-making history began facing intense scrutiny. Engelbart, who came from a corporate background before taking the WNBA helm, had always prided herself on building the league's business vision. But now, critics argued that this corporate mindset may have blurred the line between sports and spectacle. Her focus on ratings, sponsorships, and branding may have indirectly fostered an environment where manipulation could thrive. Several former employees hinted that Engelbart was aware of concerns raised by internal staff regarding referee accountability, but allegedly dismissed them as isolated incidents. A former operations assistant even claimed that during one closed-door meeting, Engelbart emphasized protecting the league's image at all costs, particularly during the high-profile rise of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. The narrative was clear. Marketability came first, fairness second, and that's what infuriated fans the most. The whistleblower's comments added fuel to the fire, describing how certain executives routinely influenced officiating trends to favor storylines that kept fan engagement high. Investigators and reporters began piecing together timelines, showing that questionable calls seemed to spike during nationally televised matchups involving star players. Even insiders suggested that Engelbart's office had the final say on referee promotions and playoff assignments, a system that, in theory, could be used to reward compliance and silence dissent. By now, sports media was circling like vultures. Headlines blared with phrases like "Engelbart under fire" and "rigging allegations, rock WNBA." While Engelbart maintained her composure publicly, her silence became deafening. For someone known to be media-savvy and calculated, her refusal to address the allegations head-on only intensified suspicion. And behind closed doors, insiders whispered that this was only the tip of the iceberg. Because if Engelbart truly had knowledge of manipulated outcomes, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be one of the biggest betrayals in WNBA history. As the controversy deepened, new reports began linking the alleged game manipulation to something far more dangerous: gambling influence. What started as whispers on social media soon turned into a full-blown storm. Insiders claimed that certain WNBA match outcomes conveniently aligned with massive betting swings, often favoring unexpected results that benefited major sports. Fans began noticing how point spreads and over-under lines seemed almost too accurate, as if someone already knew how the game would unfold before tip-off. The whistleblower hinted that internal data may have been leaked or influenced through subtle communication between referees and outside parties. Though no names were officially mentioned, speculation exploded. Could individuals within the league have been feeding information to betting networks? And if so, how deep did this connection go? Investigative journalists started tracing money trails, finding unusual betting patterns surrounding games involving star players or major market teams. Some of these wagers reached six figures, not typical for a women's basketball game. This theory took a darker turn when a former NBA referee, infamous for his own gambling scandal years ago, came forward and claimed the WNBA might be following the same dangerous path. He warned that once gambling money enters the bloodstream of a league, it becomes nearly impossible to purge. The incentive to keep games close, entertaining, and unpredictable aligns perfectly with the interests of betting companies and potentially league executives seeking to grow revenue through viewer engagement. The public reaction was immediate. Fans flooded forums calling for a federal investigation. Media outlets questioned whether Cathy Engelbart's aggressive marketing partnerships with betting platforms had opened a backdoor for corruption. After all, the WNBA had recently expanded its gambling sponsorship deals, promoting responsible betting in nearly every broadcast. But now, the irony was impossible to ignore. The league that promised transparency was being accused of selling integrity for ratings and revenue. And as the whispers turned into nationwide outrage, one question began echoing across the sports world: was the WNBA's gambling push the very thing that compromised its soul? The silence didn't last long. As the story spread across every sports outlet and social platform, several WNBA players began to hint that they too had noticed something wasn't right. Without naming names, a few stars took to social media, posting cryptic messages about uneven treatment and knowing when the game was never ours to win. Others liked or reshared posts questioning referee integrity, sparking speculation that many athletes had felt manipulated long before the whistleblower spoke. One veteran player, speaking anonymously to a major sports reporter, revealed that locker room conversations often included frustration over scripted momentum. She explained that there were moments in key games when players could sense calls shifting, not because of performance, but because of narrative. You could feel it, she said. When the league wants a rivalry to stay alive, the whistle changes. That single quote went viral, igniting conversations about how deep the psychological manipulation might go. Even younger players, like recent draft picks, started expressing unease. Some reportedly felt intimidated to speak up, fearing retaliation or reduced playing time. Behind closed doors, players' union representatives began demanding meetings with WNBA executives, pushing for clarity on officiating procedures and referee selection. The whispers of discontent were turning into organized dissent. Meanwhile, fans rallied behind the players, flooding comment sections with messages of support and outrage. Many pointed out the irony that the league, which had long preached empowerment and equality, might have been exploiting its own athletes for commercial gain. The emotional toll was visible. Players who had fought for visibility and respect suddenly found themselves questioning whether their victories were earned or orchestrated. As this new wave of testimonies poured in, pressure mounted on Cathy Engelbart to break her silence. The story had evolved from an officiating scandal into a full-blown integrity crisis, one that now involved players, fans, and possibly even sponsors. And the next move Engelbart made would determine whether the league could survive the fallout or crumble under the weight of its own deception. By the time mainstream outlets picked up the story, it had already become a national headline. ESPN, Fox Sports, and even late-night hosts were dissecting the WNBA scandal in real time. Every segment carried the same question: was the league rigging its own games? The phrase "rigged for ratings" began trending on social media as fans shared clips. slowed replays, and screenshots of suspicious calls that now looked impossible to ignore. The WNBA had built its brand on progress and empowerment, but overnight, that image started to crumble. Inside the league office, panic reportedly spread. Sources claimed emergency meetings were held to coordinate a unified response. Cathy Engelbart's communications team began drafting statements, while legal advisors urged silence. The WNBA quickly issued a carefully worded press release denying all accusations, calling them baseless and harmful to the integrity of our officials. Yet the statement only fanned the flames. It sounded rehearsed, corporate, and detached, the exact opposite of what fans wanted to hear. Media analysts pointed out how Engelbart's tone mirrored the NBA's response during its own referee scandals years ago, where transparency came only after public outrage became unavoidable. Her refusal to sit for live interviews raised further suspicion. In the absence of leadership, the story took on a life of its own. Independent journalists began digging deeper, uncovering links between referee promotions, sponsorship incentives, and broadcast partnerships. The deeper they looked, the murkier it got. Meanwhile, social media erupted with player clips juxtaposed against referee reactions, proving how often calls seemed influenced by star status or crowd size. Fan trust was at an all-time low. Commentators warned that if the league didn't address the issue soon, it might face congressional scrutiny, or worse, a federal probe. For a league already fighting for mainstream credibility, this was catastrophic. Engelbart's empire was cracking in full view of the world. And just when it seemed things couldn't spiral any further, one interview would soon surface that would take the controversy to a level no one could have predicted. The moment came unexpectedly. A well-known investigative sports journalist sat down for an exclusive interview with the whistleblower, and what he revealed sent shockwaves through the entire basketball community. For the first time, the former referee went on record, naming specific games, dates, and even league officials allegedly involved in influencing outcomes. He claimed that during certain high-profile matchups, directives came from what he called executive influence, strongly implying the commissioner's office. According to him, referees were quietly told to maintain balance or keep the game interesting. Whenever one team began to pull away, he described one instance involving a primetime televised game where a referee's decision to let play continue instead of calling a clear foul directly came from a courtside supervisor communicating through headset, the goal to extend the game's duration for broadcast value. Another shocking claim involved referee evaluations that penalized officials who failed to follow narrative expectations. Those who resisted were allegedly passed over for playoff assignments, the most lucrative part of the season. The whistleblower also produced a document he claimed was an internal memo discussing narrative-driven engagement. It was brief but damning, containing language about protecting fan interest games and controlling competitive pacing. Though the document's authenticity was still being verified, its tone was unmistakably corporate and eerily aligned with Engelbart's media-driven leadership style. Within hours, the interview went viral. Sports outlets across the country replayed key clips, dissecting every word. Hashtags, like #RiggedLeague and #WNBA, exposed dominated social feeds. Sponsors began quietly reviewing their contracts, and fan petitions called for Engelbart's resignation. Even current and former players couldn't stay silent anymore. A few publicly supported the referee's courage to speak out, while others demanded a full-scale independent investigation. By the end of the week, the WNBA wasn't just facing a public relations nightmare, it was staring at the possibility of federal oversight. And as the dust settled from the interview, one thing became crystal clear. If Cathy Engelbart didn't respond soon, someone else perhaps in Washington would. In the days that followed the whistleblower's interview, the WNBA entered full crisis mode. What began as an internal officiating controversy had now exploded into one of the biggest sports scandals in recent memory. Congressional leaders publicly called for transparency, with some lawmakers demanding that the Department of Justice review the allegations of game manipulation and gambling interference. News outlets described the situation as a ticking time bomb for women's sports, and fans were left wondering whether they had been cheering for authentic competition or a carefully crafted illusion. Inside league headquarters, Sources described an atmosphere of fear and confusion. Emails were deleted, meeting schedules were changed, and staffers were reportedly warned not to speak to the press. Even players began questioning whether they could trust the system that governed their careers. Some teams quietly reached out to their own legal counsel, preparing for the fallout if investigations uncovered proof of rigging. Meanwhile, the Players' Union demanded an emergency meeting with Cathy Engelbart, insisting that she address the allegations directly instead of hiding behind press statements. But Engelbart's silence continued to dominate headlines. When she finally appeared at a press conference weeks later, her tone was calm but defensive. She denied all wrongdoing, insisted the league's integrity was beyond reproach, and promised to review officiating policies. Yet her answers felt rehearsed, empty, a desperate attempt to control the damage. Reporters pressed her about the leaked memo and referee claims, but she dodged specifics. Her refusal to show transparency turned the press room into a battlefield of disbelief. By that point, it was too late. Sponsors were pulling back, fans were walking away, and the players' trust in the league was shattered. What had once been the dawn of a golden era for women's basketball now teetered on collapse. The world had seen the cracks behind the curtain, and no PR strategy could hide them again. The WNBA's credibility wasn't just under fire, it was hanging by a thread. And for Cathy Engelbart, that thread might soon snap. The WNBA now stands at a crossroads. What began as whispers of unfair officiating has transformed into a full-blown integrity crisis threatening to undo years of progress. The whistleblower's courage ignited a reckoning that Cathy Engelbart and the league can no longer silence. Fans, players, and sponsors all demand one thing: the truth. Whether this scandal leads to reform or collapse depends on what happens next. But one thing is certain: the trust that once fueled the WNBA's rise has been shattered. And rebuilding it will take more than statements. It will take accountability,